Ambassador Crystal of the Dominion Empire stood at the viewing window of his flagship, watching the small blue planet below. Earth, home to the humans. Such a strange species, he thought. They had been in space for only 200 years, yet they had already formed something they called the Human Alliance. The Dominion Empire had conquered over 3,000 worlds across 5 galaxies. They had crushed species far older and more advanced than humans. When they first discovered humanity, the Empire's War Council had laughed. These soft creatures, with their short lives and fragile bodies, would fall like all the others. But something was different about the humans. They did not have one government. They did not have one leader. Instead, they had dozens of nations, each with its own flag, its own language, its own history of fighting each other. The Empire had studied human history and found thousands of years of war between their own kind. This should have made them weak. This should have made them easy to conquer. Had submitted his report to the Empire's High Command 3 months ago. His recommendation was simple: attack now while they are divided. Offer some nations wealth and power. Turn them against each other. It was a strategy that had worked on hundreds of worlds before. The High Command had agreed. They sent Crystal with a fleet of 50 warships to begin the process. He was to contact the major human nations separately, offer them deals, and watch as they tore themselves apart fighting over who would get the best terms from the Empire. "Ambassador," said his aide, a young officer named Vrexo, "the human representatives have arrived, all of them." Crystal turned from the window. "All of them. I specifically requested to meet with each nation separately." "Yes, Ambassador, but they came together. They say they will only negotiate as one group." This was unexpected. Crystal's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. In his experience, conquered species always rushed to get the best deal for themselves. They would betray their neighbors to save their own people. It was the natural way of things. "Very well," Crystal said, "show them in." The conference room on his flagship was large enough to hold 50 beings. The human delegation numbered only 12, but they filled the room with their presence. Recognized some of them from his intelligence reports. There was President Chen of the Asian Federation, Chancellor Mueller of the European Union, Prime Minister Okonkwo of the African Coalition, President Rodriguez of the American States, and 8 others representing every major human nation. They sat together at one side of the table. Their faces were calm, some even smiled. Crystal took his seat across from them. His aides arranged themselves behind him. "Thank you for coming," Crystal began. He spoke through a translator device that converted his words to the human language called English. "The Dominion Empire wishes to discuss the future of your species." President Chen leaned forward. She was a small woman with gray hair, but her eyes were sharp. "We know why you're here, Ambassador. Your empire has conquered many worlds. You think Earth will be next." "We do not think," Crystal said. "We know. The Dominion Empire has never lost a war. We have never failed to conquer a world we desired. Your planet has resources we want. Your species could be useful workers in our mines and factories." "Slaves," said Chancellor Mueller. "You mean slaves?" "We prefer the term integrated labor force," Crystal said. "But yes, that is the fate of conquered peoples." The humans looked at each other. Crystal expected fear. He expected panic. He expected them to start arguing about who should make a deal first. Instead, President Rodriguez laughed. "You've done your research on us," Rodriguez said. "You've seen our history. You've seen our wars. You think we'll turn on each other to save ourselves." "It is the logical outcome," Crystal said. "Your species has never been united. Even now, your so-called human alliance is just words on paper, treaty signatures, nothing more." Prime Minister Okonkwo stood up. She was tall and proud, and her voice was strong. "You have made a mistake, Ambassador, a very big mistake." "Oh, and what is that?" "You have only seen our wars against each other," Okonkwo said. You have not seen what happens when we face a common enemy." Crystal's aide leaned close and whispered, "Ambassador, we are detecting unusual activity from the human military bases. Ships are launching. Many ships." "How many?" Crystal asked quietly. "All of them, sir. Every human warship in their fleet is moving to orbit." On the screens around the conference room, the humans activated a display. It showed space around Earth, watched as hundreds of human ships rose from the planet's surface and from hidden bases on the moon. They came from every nation, ships with different designs, different colors, different flags painted on their hulls. But they moved together. They formed into one massive fleet, and they pointed their weapons at Crystal's ships. 212 years ago, President Chen said, the nations of Earth signed the Human Alliance Treaty. You are right that for most of that time it was just words, just signatures. We continued to argue. We continued to compete. We continued to distrust each other. She stood up and walked to the window. The human fleet was now visible as points of light against the darkness of space. But we also trained together. We shared technology. We built communication systems that connect every ship in our fleet, and we made one promise to each other. "What promise?" Crystal asked. His voice was not as steady as before. "That if any outside force threatened any human nation, all human nations would respond as one. Not because we were forced to, not because of treaty obligations, but because we finally understood something that took us thousands of years to learn." Chancellor Mueller finished her thought. "We are stronger together than we could ever be apart." Crystal's aide spoke again, more urgently this time. "Ambassador, the human ships have locked weapons on our fleet, and there are more coming. Ships from Mars, ships from the asteroid belt, ships from the outer planets. The count is now over 3,000. 3,000 ships," could not hide his shock. "Our intelligence said you had only 500. President Rodriguez smiled. "Your intelligence only counted military ships. Those are just our front line. What you're seeing now are cargo ships, mining vessels, passenger liners. Every human ship with even a small weapon is joining the fleet." "You cannot be serious," Crystal said. "Mining vessels against warships, that is suicide." "No," Okonkwo said. "That is humanity. When we fight for our survival, every farmer picks up a weapon, every teacher becomes a soldier, every miner flies their ship into battle. We do not surrender, we do not negotiate, we do not turn on each other." She leaned across the table, her eyes meeting Crystal's. "We fight together, and we die together if we must." The room was silent. Crystal's mind raced through possibilities. His 50 warships were among the best in the Empire's fleet. They could destroy hundreds of these human ships, but thousands. And if the humans truly would not surrender, if they would keep fighting until every last ship was destroyed. "Your fleet is impressive," Crystal said slowly. "But the Dominion Empire has millions of ships, billions of soldiers. You cannot win this war." "Maybe not," President Chen said, "but neither can you." She returned to her seat and folded her hands on the table. "You can conquer Earth. You can destroy our ships, but you will lose half your fleet doing it. And then what? Every human colony, every human station, every human settlement across the solar system and beyond will fight you. Not because we tell them to, not because of orders, but because that is who we are." "You will hunt you," Rodriguez added. "For generations. Your empire will bleed trying to hold our worlds. Your soldiers will never be safe. And eventually you will leave, or you will fall." Had heard threats before. Every species made threats when facing conquest. But something in the human's eyes told him this was different. This was not desperation. This was certainty. "I need to contact my high command," Crystal said. "Take your time," Okonkwo said. "We're not going anywhere, and neither are our ships." The transmission to the Dominion High Command took 3 hours to connect. In that time, Crystal watched the human fleet continue to grow. Ships that should have been enemies flew side by side. Vessels from nations that had fought wars against each other only decades ago now shared formation positions and communication channels. It was impossible. It went against everything the Empire knew about how species behaved. And yet there it was. When the High Command finally responded, it was the Emperor himself who appeared on the screen. His Excellency Drakmar the Eternal, ruler of 3,000 worlds, conqueror of 12 species, looked tired. "Ambassador Crystal," the Emperor said, "we have received your report. We have also received reports from our other observation posts near human space." "Yes, Your Excellency." "Every human colony is mobilizing. Their merchant fleets are arming themselves. Even their civilian stations are preparing defenses." The Emperor paused. "They are doing this without any central command. The Human Alliance government has not even issued orders yet. They are simply doing it on their own." "They are united, Your Excellency," Crystal said. "Truly united, not by force or fear but by choice." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. "We have conquered many species," he finally said. "Some fought hard, some surrendered quickly, but none of them ever unified like this. None of them ever chose to stand together against us when they could have saved themselves by standing apart." "What are your orders, Your Excellency?" The Emperor's ancient eyes looked weary. "Return to Empire space, immediately." "Your Excellency." "The humans are not worth the cost. We will find easier prey elsewhere." The transmission ended. Sat in silence for a long time, then he ordered his fleet to withdraw. As his flagship turned away from Earth, he took one last look at the planet below. Somewhere down there, 12 leaders from 12 nations were probably celebrating. They had faced the greatest military power in the known universe, and they had won without firing a single shot. Not because of their weapons, not because of their technology, but because when the moment came, they had chosen to stand together. Crystal had spent his whole life studying conquered peoples. He had seen what fear could do. He had seen what greed could do, but he had never seen what true unity could do. Until now. The humans had taught the Dominion Empire something new, and the Empire would not forget. 5 years passed after the Dominion fleet's withdrawal from Earth. In that time, the Human Alliance changed in ways no one expected. Before the confrontation, the Alliance had been exactly what Ambassador Crystal said it was: words on paper, treaty signatures, a promise that everyone hoped would never be tested. But now that it had been tested, now that humanity had seen what they could do together, things were different. Admiral Sarah Torres stood on the bridge of the UHS Unity, the first truly international warship in human history. The crew came from every nation on Earth. They spoke different languages, followed different customs, practiced different religions. But they served together, trained together, and would fight together if the need arose. Torres was from the American states, but her first officer was from the Asian Federation. Her chief engineer was African. Her tactical officer was European. Her pilot was from the South American Union. They had been assigned together 3 years ago, and now they moved as one unit, anticipating each other's needs without speaking. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Commander Wei, her first officer, "we're approaching the rendezvous point." "Good. What's the status of the fleet?" "All ships reporting ready, 22 vessels from 12 nations." Torres nodded. This was a routine patrol mission along the edge of human space. The Dominion Empire had not returned, but humanity was not taking chances anymore. The Alliance now maintained a permanent defensive fleet, crewed by volunteers from every nation, funded by contributions from every government. But this mission was different from a standard patrol. 3 months ago, long-range sensors had detected a distress signal from a system beyond human space. The signal was not human. It was not Dominion either. It was from a species no one had encountered before. The Alliance government had debated for weeks about how to respond. Some argued that humanity should focus on its own defense. Others said that reaching out to unknown species was dangerous. But in the end, the decision was made to investigate. "We're here to help if we can," President Chen had said in her address to the Alliance Council. "That's what being united means, not just defending ourselves but extending that protection to others." So Admiral Torres and her fleet had been sent to find the source of the signal. Dropping out of faster-than-light travel, Lieutenant Park announced from the pilot's seat. The stars stretched and then snapped back to normal points of light. Torres looked at the main view screen and saw devastation. A planet hung in space before them. It had once been green and blue like Earth. Now it was brown and gray. Smoke rose from massive craters on its surface. Debris fields surrounded it, the remains of ships and stations that had been destroyed. "My God," whispered Commander Wei. "Scan for life signs," Torres ordered. Scanning. The tactical officer, Lieutenant Schmidt, worked his controls. "I'm detecting scattered life signs on the surface, maybe a few million. But Admiral, before the attack, this planet had a population of 12 billion. 12 billion, Torres felt sick. Can you identify what attacked them?" The weapon signatures matched Dominion Empire technology. So the Empire had found easier prey, just as the Emperor had promised. But they had not just conquered this world. They had nearly destroyed it. "Admiral, I'm picking up a transmission," said Communications Officer Akafer. "It's weak, but it's coming from the surface." "Put it through." The speakers crackled, and then a voice came through. It was thin and tired, speaking a language the translation software had never heard before. But after a few moments, the computer began to make sense of it. "Anyone who can hear this, we are the Kel. Our world has fallen. The Empire came without warning. Our fleet was destroyed in hours. Please, if anyone is listening, we need help." Torres looked at her officers. They all wore the same expression: horror at what had happened here, and determination to do something about it. "Open a channel," Torres said. "Channel open." "This is Admiral Sarah Torres of the Human Alliance Fleet. We received your distress signal. We are here to help." There was a long silence. Then the voice returned, trembling with emotion. "Humans, we have heard of you. The Empire spoke of you. They said you were cowards who would not fight." Torres almost laughed. "They were wrong about that. We just chose not to fight a war we could avoid. But we don't abandon people who need help. We're coming to your surface. Tell us where to find you." The coordinates came through, and Torres began issuing orders. Medical ships would land first to treat the injured. Engineering teams would follow to help restore basic infrastructure. Security forces would establish a perimeter in case the Empire returned. "Admiral," Commander Wei said quietly, "we're not authorized for this. Our mission was to investigate only. The Alliance government will need to approve any extended humanitarian operation. Then contact them and get approval. In the meantime, we have people dying down there. I'm not going to sit in orbit and watch while politicians debate." Wei nodded and moved to the communication station. Torres knew she was taking a risk. This decision could end her career. But she also knew that her crew supported her. Every one of them had joined the Alliance fleet because they believed in something bigger than their own nations. They believed in humanity. And today, humanity would show the galaxy what that meant. The landing on the Kel homeworld was the beginning of something no one had planned. The Kel were a gentle species. They had 4 arms and large, sad eyes. They were artists and musicians, philosophers and poets. They had never developed weapons beyond simple hunting tools. When the Dominion Empire arrived, they had tried to negotiate to offer tribute to find a peaceful solution. The Empire had killed 12 billion of them anyway, not because the Kel resisted, but because the Emperor wanted to send a message to other species. This is what happens when you cannot defend yourselves. Admiral Torres spent 3 days on the surface, coordinating the relief effort. Human doctors worked alongside Kel healers. Human engineers taught Kel workers how to repair their damaged infrastructure. Human soldiers stood guard, watching the skis for any sign of the Empire's return. On the 4th day, Torres received a transmission from Earth. President Chen's face appeared on her screen. Admiral Torres, I've received your reports. Yes, Madam President. I apologize for exceeding my authority. Admiral, you saved over 2 million lives. There's nothing to apologize for. Torres felt relief wash over her. Thank you, Madam President. But we have a larger issue to discuss. The Alliance Council has been in session for 2 days. We've received messages from 17 other species in this region of space. They all say the same thing. The Dominion Empire is expanding. They're conquering every world they can reach. Why the sudden expansion? President Chen's expression was grim. Because of us. When we stood together against them, they backed down. But the Emperor needs to prove his strength, so he's attacking everyone else, showing the galaxy that they can still conquer, just not humanity. Torres felt her hands tighten into fists. So, our resistance made things worse for others. That's one way to look at it, but the Council sees it differently. We've been contacted by a coalition of 12 species. They want to form an alliance with humanity. They want our protection. Our protection. Madam President, we can barely protect ourselves. Perhaps, but they've seen what we did here for the Kel. They've heard about how we stood together against the Empire. They believe that if they join with us, they might have a chance. Torres looked out the window of her command tent. She could see Kel children playing in the ruins of their city. Human soldiers were teaching them a game, something simple involving a ball. The children were laughing, maybe for the first time since the attack. What is the Council's decision? Torres asked. The Council has decided to accept. We're going to expand the human alliance. It won't just be human anymore. It will be something bigger, something that includes everyone who wants to stand together against tyranny. Does it have a name? President Chen smiled. We're calling it the Unified Species Alliance, USA for short. A few of our American friends thought that was appropriate. Torres laughed. It felt good to laugh. And what happens next? That's why I'm calling you, Admiral. The Council has created a new position, Supreme Commander of Alliance Defense Forces. We need someone who understands what it means to fight for others, not just for your own nation. Someone who's already proven they'll put the needs of the many above orders from above. Torres understood. You're offering me the job. I'm offering you a choice. You can come home, retire with honors, and let someone else handle this. Or you can help build something new, something that might change the galaxy. Admiral Torres thought about her crew, about the nations they came from, about the wars their ancestors had fought against each other, about how they had learned to work together, to trust each other, to fight as one. Could that be scaled up? Could an alliance of different species learn to do what humanity had learned to do? She didn't know, but she knew she had to try. I'll take the job, she said. President Chen nodded. I hoped you would. Good luck, Admiral, or should I say Supreme Commander. Just Torres is fine, Madam President. Titles don't win wars, people do. The war that followed lasted 17 years. It was the most devastating conflict the galaxy had ever seen. The Dominion Empire threw everything they had at the new Unified Species Alliance. They expected the alliance to fall apart, just as every other coalition had. They expected the different species to turn on each other, to make separate deals, to save themselves at the expense of their allies. But Torres had learned humanity's lesson well, and she taught it to every species that joined the alliance. We fight together, she told them. Not because we're forced to, not because of treaty obligations, but because we choose to, because we understand that divided we all fall, but united we cannot be broken. It wasn't easy. The different species had different cultures, different values, different ways of fighting. They disagreed about strategy. They argued about tactics. Sometimes they argued about whether the war was even worth fighting. But whenever the debates grew too heated, Tors would remind them of the Kell, of the 12 billion who died because they had no one to stand with them, of the children who still had nightmares about the day the Empire came. That's what happens when you stand alone, she would say, and that's why we stand together. Slowly, battle by battle, the Alliance pushed back the Empire. They didn't win every fight. They lost ships, lost soldiers, lost entire worlds sometimes, but they kept fighting, and they kept standing together. In the war's 10th year, the Emperor himself sent a message to Tors. It was the first time a Dominion ruler had ever communicated directly with an enemy commander. "You are prolonging the inevitable," the Emperor said. "The Dominion Empire has never been defeated. You are only delaying your destruction." Tors looked at the Emperor's face on her screen. He was old now, older than when she had seen him through Ambassador Crixtal's report years ago. The war had aged him. "Your Excellency," Tors said, "you've been telling us that for 10 years, and yet here we are still fighting, still standing. Because of human stubbornness, but your allies will eventually see reason. They will realize that surrender is better than extinction." "You still don't understand, do you? You've never understood." Tors leaned forward. "Our allies have seen what you do to people who surrender. The Kell surrendered. You killed 12 billion of them anyway. You've taught the galaxy that there's no point in giving up because you destroy everyone either way." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "Then you admit there is no hope." "No, I'm saying you've created something you never expected. You've given every species in this alliance something to fight for, not just survival, justice, for the Kell, for every world you've destroyed, for every people you've enslaved." She smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "You wanted to send a message when you destroyed the Kell homeworld. You did, but not the message you intended. You showed everyone what happens if they don't stand together, and they listened." The transmission ended, and Tors returned to planning the next battle. 7 years later, the war ended. It ended not with a grand battle, but with a revolution. The species the Empire had enslaved, the billions of workers who kept the Empire's factories running and mines producing, rose up. They had been watching the war. They had seen that resistance was possible, and they had learned the same lesson the Alliance had taught. They stood together. The Empire tried to crush the rebellion, but they couldn't fight on two fronts. Their fleets were engaged with the Alliance. Their armies were spread thin across 1,000 worlds, and when the slaves refused to work, the Empire's war machine ground to a halt. Emperor Drakmer, the Eternal, was overthrown by his own guards. The Dominion Empire, which had stood for 10,000 years, fell in a single night. Tors received the news on the bridge of the UHS Unity. The ship was old now, had been in 100 battles, had been repaired so many times that little of the original vessel remained. But it was still her flagship, still the symbol of what humanity had helped build. "It's over," Commander Wei said. He was old too, gray-haired and wrinkled, but still at her side after all these years. "I never thought I'd see this day." "Neither did I," Tors admitted. "When I took this job, I thought we'd fight until we died or they destroyed us. I never imagined we'd actually win." "What happens now?" Tors looked at the view screen. It showed a map of the galaxy, with Alliance space marked in blue and former Empire space marked in gray. There was so much gray, so many worlds that would need help rebuilding, so many species that would need to learn how to live free. "Now comes the hard part," she said. "Winning the war was just the beginning. Keeping everyone together in peace, that's the real challenge." She thought about Earth, about the centuries of war that had followed every great human conflict, about how hard it had been to build the human alliance, and how close it had come to falling apart so many times. But they had done it. Humanity had learned to stand together, and they had taught others to do the same. "We'll make mistakes," Tor said. "We'll argue and disagree, and sometimes we'll fail, but we'll keep trying. We'll keep choosing unity over division. That's all we can do." "That's enough," Wei said. "It's always been enough." Tors nodded. Then she straightened in her chair and addressed her crew. "All hands, this is the Supreme Commander. As of today, the war is over. The Dominion Empire has fallen. Our alliance has won." She paused, letting the cheers fade. "But our work is not done. There are billions of people who need our help, worlds that need to be rebuilt, wounds that need to heal. So we're not going home, not yet. We're going forward to help whoever needs us, because that's who we are, that's who we've always been." She looked at the faces of her crew, human, Kel, and a dozen other species now serving together on this ship. All of them united by something more powerful than fear or treaties or orders. "We are the Unified Species Alliance, and we stand together." 50 years later, a monument was built on the Kel homeworld. It stood in the ruins of the old capital city, which had been deliberately preserved as a memorial. The monument was simple, a tall pillar of white stone, surrounded by gardens that bloomed with flowers from 100 different worlds. On the pillar were carved the names of every species that had joined the alliance. Humans were first, but not because they were the most important. They were first because they had been the ones to start it all. The ones who had learned, after thousands of years of fighting each other, that standing together was better than standing alone. Below the names was an inscription in every language the Alliance used. The words were simple. "We learned to fight each other. Then we learned to fight together. Now we learn to live together. The lesson continues." Every year, representatives from every Alliance species gathered at the monument for a ceremony. They came not to celebrate victory, but to remember sacrifice. To remember the 12 billion Kel who had died. To remember the soldiers of every species who had given their lives in the war. To remember what the galaxy had been before, and to commit to making sure it never returned to those dark days. Admiral Tors was buried there when she died at age 93. Her tomb was beside the monument, marked only by a simple stone that read, "She taught us to stand together." President Chen was buried nearby, along with the other leaders who had made the choice to unite humanity all those years ago. They had not been perfect leaders. They had made mistakes, argued with each other, sometimes failed their people. But when the moment came, they had chosen unity, and that choice had changed everything. The human alliance had started as just words on paper, treaty signatures, a promise no one knew how to keep. But when it was tested, when humanity faced an enemy that threatened all of them, those words became action. Those signatures became commitment. That promise became truth. And that truth had spread across the galaxy. Not every species had learned the lesson. There were still wars, still conflicts, still beings who believed that conquest was better than cooperation. But they were fewer now. And they faced an alliance that would stand against them, not with aggression, but with the simple, powerful message that there was another way. The young ones who grew up in the alliance learned the history in school. They learned about the Dominion Empire and its fall. They learned about Admiral Tors and her fleet. They learned about the choice that humanity had made when Ambassador Crystal came to Earth with his offers of individual deals and his expectations of division. But the most important lesson was simpler than all of that. They learned that alliance meant more than treaties, more than signatures, more than words. Alliance meant fighting together, living together, standing together no matter what came. The Empire had learned that lesson the hard way, and the galaxy would never forget it. On the anniversary of the Dominion's fall, 100 years after the war ended, a human child stood before the monument on the Kel homeworld. She was part of a school trip, one of thousands of young people who made the pilgrimage every year. The teacher, an elderly Kel with gentle eyes, asked if anyone had questions. The girl raised her hand. Why did the humans help us? They didn't have to. The Empire wasn't attacking Earth anymore. The Kel teacher smiled. It was a question he had been asked many times before. Because, he said, they understood something that took the rest of us a long time to learn. They understood that when one of us suffers, all of us suffer. When one of us falls, all of us become weaker. And when one of us stands up to fight, all of us must stand beside them. But how did they learn that? The girl asked. They used to fight each other all the time. Yes, they did, for thousands of years, but they never stopped trying to do better. They kept making mistakes and they kept learning from them. And eventually they built something that had never existed before, a true alliance. Not just a treaty, not just signatures, a real commitment to stand together no matter what. The girl thought about this. Then she asked one more question. Do you think we can keep it going, forever? The teacher looked at the monument, at the names carved in stone, at the gardens blooming with flowers from 100 worlds. I don't know, he admitted. Nothing lasts forever, but every day that we choose unity over division, every day that we stand together instead of standing apart, we keep the alliance alive. It's a choice we have to make again and again, every single day. He looked down at the girl and smiled. And today we choose to stand together, just like they did, just like we always will. The girl nodded. She didn't fully understand yet. She was too young to grasp all the history, all the sacrifice, all the pain that had led to this moment. But she would learn. They all would. Because that was what the alliance was for. Not just defending against enemies. Not just building a better future. But teaching each new generation the lesson that humanity had learned, the lesson they had taught to the galaxy. Alliance means fighting together, living together, standing together. Not just treaty signatures. Real commitment, real unity, real strength. And that lesson would endure, passed down from generation to generation, species to species, world to world, as long as anyone remembered to teach it. The Empire had learned it the hard way. The galaxy had learned it through fire and blood. And now, at last, everyone knew the truth that humanity had discovered all those centuries ago, when they looked up at the stars and realized they would have to face them together or not at all. We are stronger together. Always.